Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with reference recordings. And today we're talking about Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony. Now, as I've indicated previously, some Beethoven symphonies have reference recordings and some don't. The big ones do. The little ones, well, not so much. And that's for obvious reasons. Depends on how popular they are, how many times they've been recorded, how much attention we pay to them, and how long there's been for a consensus to evolve around any particular version. Well, the Pastoral Symphony, of course, has had 30 bazillion recordings, and quite a few of them are just splendid. It's a gloriously wonderful work, but a tricky one to pull off. The tricky bits come largely from the slow movement, the scene by the brook, which can meander unacceptably. It really can. But the reference recordings here have an interesting take on that. They really do. So we have to start. There are two. Two references for the Pastoral Symphony. Not all of which I agree with, but well, I sort of do, actually. I understand the reasons for them. Let's put it that way. And you may disagree with them as well. But the first, and you called this one a long time ago, many videos ago, you plonked in and said, okay, for the Pastoral Symphony, it has to be Bruno Walter. And of course it does. Of course it does. It's one of the greatest recordings of anything by anybody, and certainly one of the most sensitive and heartfelt and gorgeous recordings of this particular work. Now, Walter did it twice. He did it first in mono, or twice for Columbia anyway, with the Philadelphia Orchestra, which is quite a beautiful performance. And this is his stereo remake in old age. We all talk about how, he's looking back of a lifetime of serenity and calm and blissful human kindness and, all of that bullshit, frankly. Walter was actually quite a lively conductor for the most part, and his Pastoral Symphony is a lively performance. It really is. It is honeyed. It is beautifully flowing. It has this wonderful, effortless sense of flow and rhythm to it. That comes with experience. That's called great conducting. I mean, it's also, of course, some sort of inner manifestation of his warmth and friendliness and all. He had all of those things. Yes, he was. He was a schmooze. But this Pastoral Symphony has tension and it has line. It doesn't have a first movement exposition repeat because in those days people didn't take them so much. And for some people, that's kind of an issue. It's not an issue for me. I prefer it. I like it. The music's gorgeous. I think we should expose as much as we can and take the repeats, but that's okay. It's not actually that fabulous a repeat when you get down to it. Beethoven wasn't always very good at writing repeats because his music is so forward driving that to go back to the beginning, sometimes he's like, oh, do I have to? Anyway, this isn't the best and it's not the worst of his first movement exposition repeats, but it is a stunningly beautiful performance. Richly, so richly deserving of its reference quality. But it is old. It's from the 50s. It's well recorded. It sounds very, very good. I wonder if they have a date here. I always check, to see if there's a date, and there usually isn't one, and it's like a nightmare to figure it out. But let's see here. Oh, it's tiny. Yes, there is a date. Wait a minute. Oh, where's my, here it is. I have my magnifying glass here because you can't see a damn thing on these. This is so tiny. Okay, there we go. Recorded in Legion Hall, Los Angeles, 1958. Yes, January 13th, 15th, and 17th, 1958. They took 3 days to do this recording. That's something. Nowadays, they just sort of whip through it, and, nobody cares how long it took. So, it was an obvious reference recording, and people felt, I think, that Bruno Walter deserved a reference recording, and they had to find the gentlest Beethoven symphony to give him because he was a gentle soul. Well, like I said, that's not really true, but that's okay because there's some other fantastic Beethoven performances in here. His fifth is really good. Anyway, so there you have it. A really first-class and and rehearsals. You don't get a rehearsal of the sixth. This is the box of all the Beethoven symphonies. All right. So we had Bruno Walter, and that was hanging out there. But it was in some ways unsatisfactory as a reference because he had the Columbia Symphony Orchestra. I mean, essentially a pickup ensemble. Wonderful band. But, people sort of thought, well, it's Beethoven and I wish we could get some nice German orchestra doing Beethoven. So there had to be another reference recording. And so for political reasons, partly, and musical as well, the next one that came along was this one, Karl Böhm with the Vienna Philharmonic. Oh yes, Vienna, Beethoven and Vienna. We have to have a reference recording with Beethoven and Vienna. It has to be Vienna because Beethoven was in Vienna and the Viennese know how to do Viennese music. Well, sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. The fact is, and the dirty secret, is that aside from Schmidt-Isserstedt, the Vienna Philharmonic has done very few excellent Beethoven cycles. Very few. Most of them are pretty boring, kind of slovenly sounding or thick and heavy. I don't think that they're an ideal Beethoven orchestra unless they have the ideal Beethoven conductor in front of them doing ideal Beethoven. They have no special claim to this repertoire. Zero. The orchestra that has a special claim to the Viennese repertoire of Beethoven it's gone now, the Paris Conservatory Orchestra under people like Schuricht, because that was an orchestra that was formed in 1827, which was 20 years before the Vienna Philharmonic even got going or so, specifically for the purpose of performing Beethoven symphonies under Habeneck, who knew Beethoven. So now there's an orchestra that has the pedigree. The Viennese don't. It's one of music's best kept secrets. It's all just PR and bullshit. It really is. However, that said, Böhm came out with this Beethoven cycle that has some marvelous performances in it and some rather stodgy performances in it, as Böhm could be, but his Pastoral Symphony is gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. Now, some might say, oh, well, there's another wonderful Vienna Pastoral Symphony with Pierre Monteux. Yeah, there is. And it may be better than this one. Problem is, Monteux is French, and Jewish. Holy crap. What's he doing, being a Beethoven guy? So, there are all kinds of reasons why things become reference recordings. People come into recordings with certain expectations, and they hear what they expect to hear, rather than simply wiping the slate clean and letting the music wash over you. Now, with that said, this Pastoral Symphony is a gorgeous Pastoral Symphony. The slow movement, however, takes a little indulgence because Böhm, talk about, Böhm just sort of floats through it in 14 minutes. My sort of cutoff point for the slow movement of the symphony is 12 minutes. Bruno Walter is just under 12 minutes. And you hear the difference immediately. Now, I don't mind the extra 2 minutes because the playing really is so beautiful. It's absolutely lovely. The sonics are lovely. Everything, it's just creamy and delicious. And it's like a, Viennese, Schlag Ober's whipped cream frothy thing there. Now, you might like to have a more lean and austere Beethoven, a la period instruments or things like that, in which case you're going to be horrified by this one. But when it came out, people felt felt that we had to have a great Viennese Pastoral Symphony, a great reference from Vienna, something, along with the Carlos Kleiber Fifth, which came a little later, I believe. And so this was the one of choice. And I understand it. Like I said, I like the performance. It does have the exposition repeat in the first movement. If you can get through the slow movement, the rest of it is equally gorgeous. It really is a first-class performance. And so I have no problem with the fact that that is the additional reference. But remember, reference recordings are not the ones I necessarily like. They're not necessarily what my choices would have been. They're the ones that the universe has selected. The universe of critics, the universe. I mean, I think this is the Pastoral Symphony that got the Rosette in the Penguin Guide, for example, or something like that. It was always plugged as one of the great Pastoral Symphonies, but it also has something in common with Bruno, which is that neither conductor was considered the ultimate Beethoven conductors of their era. Böhm did this in Vienna, but you had Karl making Beethoven cycle after Beethoven cycle. And when Bruno was doing this, Toscanini was just recently passed away, and Fortfangler and those people, there were Zell's Beethoven, of course. Beethoven Pastoral Symphony could very easily be a reference recording. It's fantastic. But, they both got the Pastoral Symphony as their reference recordings because there was this sense that they were getting the consolation prize in Beethoven conducting. Yeah, well, they weren't great at the Fifth, or they weren't great at... And so they had to be given something, and it had to be one of the big ones. It couldn't be the Eroica. God knows, no. So let's give them the Pastoral Symphony and pat them on the head and send them on their way. That was the feeling you kind of got talking about these performances and these conductors in Beethoven. It was very strange. It was just a very, very weird thing. The undercurrent of why these things became reference recordings. And I can't really recall anything quite like it because they were very eminent and venerable conductors. So there you have it, my friends, the reference recording for Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony. Keep on listening and take care.